Aurora, thank you for joining us today. How are things in Vancouver?
They're great, and we're happy to be here with you having this chat today, Jimmy.
Thank you. Aurora, I want to provide you with a brief overview of where I want to take our discussion in the next few minutes. And I want to start with a brief overview of Amerigo Resources, Amerigo's relationship with Codelco, Amerigo's operations in Chile, 2021 production numbers, balance sheet and capital allocation, and conclude with a discussion on growth potential. Aurora, Amerigo Resources is very unique in that it produces copper, but it's not a copper mine per se. And for those viewers who might not be familiar with the company, can you just provide a brief overview of Amerigo?
Absolutely, happy to do that. Amerigo was founded in 2003 in order to acquire a Chilean company called Minera Valle Central. Its short name is MVC. We all call it MVC. So MVC has been in operation since 1992, so that's, wow, 30 years now. And it focuses on producing copper by processing the tailings from Codelco's El Teniente mine. And let me just do a little bit of a sideline here, Jimmy, to talk about Codelco just for a minute. Codelco is a state-owned Chilean company. It is the single most significant copper producer in the world. And just to give you an idea, in 2020, and I use 2020 because they haven't yet published their 2021 data, Codelco produced 1.6 million tons of copper. Codelco has 7 mines, and its single most significant operation is the El Teniente mine, which is the mine with which we have a relationship at MVC. El Teniente produced in 2020 443,000 tons of copper. So these are significant operations, and for us being partner with Codelco in respect of processing the tailings that they generate is, it's an honor badge in the copper world. Amerigo is essentially the only company in the world that is fully focused on economically producing copper by processing tailings. And tailings are environmental liabilities. By definition, that's what they are. They are the waste product of mines. So we have a pretty good and unique angle that way. Just to finish the introduction, we also produce molybdenum as a byproduct of the copper process, Jimmy.
So in essence, your business model entails removing an environmental liability, in this case, tailings from a mine, and you're making an economic asset, which is copper, and you're selling it and you're making money doing so.
Absolutely. It's a perfect example of the circular economy. It's someone else's waste becomes the productive element in someone else's process, and we actually generate a substantial economic benefit for our shareholders, for our employees, for the community in which we operate in.
Amerigo recently released its 2021 financial results, and the numbers were up significantly across the board. Can you just provide us with an overview of those numbers, please? And why don't we just start with the actual pounds of copper produced in 2021?
Yeah, absolutely. 2021 was a great year for Amerigo, and that was on the back of 2 fundamental aspects. One of them was a strong production. We had a production of 63.4 million pounds of copper in 2021, up from 55 million pounds produced the year before. So we had a significant ramp up in production, and we knew that going into the year. Not only did we meet our guidance, we actually beat our production guidance. So we're very proud of the achievements in respect of our operational results. Now, when you have a strong production coupled with robust copper prices, which is what happened last year, you essentially have, in Amerigo's case, a cash generating machine. And that, the combination of those 2 elements really translated into robust, actually record financial results for our company in 2021. just as a sideline, whenever I speak of dollars, I always refer to US dollars. That's our reporting currency. So in 2021, we had a record revenue of $199.6 million. We generated EBITDA of $90.1 million. Our net income was $39.8 million. And that represents earnings per shares of 22 cents US. And just for reference purposes, earnings per share of 28 cents Canadian.
So you brought up a very important point, and that is the copper price, and your business is very sensitive to that, of course. And the average price in 2020 was $2.94 a pound. In 2021, it was $4.25. So that had a big impact on your earnings, as you just mentioned. But maybe you can just dive a little bit deeper into that. But now that copper is trading around the 450 level, what does this mean? And if it goes to 475, maybe you can just touch on the sensitivity of the copper price to your numbers.
Yeah, that's a good point, and we provide that story and that visual graphic of the sensitivity of copper prices as a core part of our investor presentation on our website. Just to give you an idea, let's talk about the low level, $3 per pound copper. We basically are still operating on the black. We generate EBITDA of $6 million. This is all based on our 22 guidance for production and costs. If you're talking about a $4 copper price, our projected EBITDA for this year would be $54 million. And when you're talking about the higher values, I'm just going to use a copper price of $4.89, and that's because it is the point, the trigger at which we would have to revisit some of our royalties with Codelco. We pay them a royalty based on copper price in consideration for having the rights to processing their tailings. But at $4.89 per pound, we would be generating essentially $89 million of EBITDA. So you can see that there is a huge correlation on copper price to our cash generating capacity, and we're highly levered and fully exposed to copper prices, Jimmy.
And why don't we talk, so you talked about the revenue and what happens with the copper price, but why don't we look at your cost structure now, and just can you tell us what the cash cost was in 2021 and maybe what the primary components of the cash cost is and how that impacts the bottom line?
Sure. In 2021, our cash cost was $1.75 per pound, and we have 5 significant costs that represent 73% of that cash cost. And those costs are, in order of importance, power, treatment and refinery charges, direct labor, steel. We use steel in the form of grinding balls for the grinding process, and lime. The most significant of the 5 is power. And power for us it's fundamentally important to have good control of our power costs. In 2021, power costs represented 49 cents per pound, and we are well covered in respect of power because in 2020 we entered into a long-term power supply agreement that goes all the way up to 2037. That essentially has locked in our power rates through that period of time. Yes, we're subject to inflationary adjustments on those power rates and to changes in pass-through charges. Those are grid-related charges, but we essentially know what the power cost will be in the case of MVC on a going forward basis. We actually negotiated a step down in power rates for 4 years when we entered into this contract. So from 2020 to 2023, we have been getting a step down in rates, which despite inflationary adjustments has essentially kept us at the same power cost of 9 cents per kilowatt hour, which is a great place to be at. Our second most significant cost within the cash cost view of things is TCRCs, treatment and refinery charges. Those are essentially the same charges across the board on an annual basis through the benchmark that all copper producers are subject to. In our case, in 2021, they represented 30 cents per pound. And then the other three important costs are direct labor, which has a cost for us of 19 cents per pound in 2021. Steel, I mentioned that, at 15 cents per pound, and lime, 11 cents per pound.
And as you mentioned earlier, end production is very important to your overall model, and a part of that is grade. Can you just touch on the grade and how it's different between the what you call fresh tailings versus historical tailings?
Sure. That's a good question, Jimmy, because our production is the subject of three, or is a result of three factors: throughput, grade, and recovery. And when you're talking about MVC, because we're processing tailings, you essentially have a different type of operation. We have a high volume operation that is processing very low grade material. So that's a double challenge, and it's not for the faint of heart, but our team in Chile has done an excellent job at mastering the art of the low grade materials. You also mentioned that we have two different types of tailings. We get the ongoing production, or the ongoing tailings from production from El Teniente on a daily basis, in a continuous basis actually, and those are called fresh tailings. But we also have access to historical tailings that were deposited by El Teniente adjacent to the MVC facility between 1935 and 1986. So both of those sources of material are the tailings that we process, and they are different materials. We actually have different circuits for both of them. In the case of the fresh tailings, they have even lower grade than the historical tailings. The fresh tailings have an average grade in 2020-21 of 0.147%. And we had a recovery of 20.7% on fresh. And on the historical tailings, the grade in 2021 was 0.238%, and the recovery was, of course, higher at 32.8%. What we achieved in terms of final production results for 2021 of 63.4 million pounds came essentially almost 50-50 from fresh and historical tailings.
That's a great overview of your operations. Let's move on now to your balance sheet and your capital allocation. How much cash do you currently have, and how will you allocate it in the coming year?
I'm glad you're asking that question, because discussing the balance sheet for 2021 for Amerigo is quite important. The good financial results that we had in 2021 really translated themselves into the balance sheet. We started the year 2021 with 14 million of cash, and we ended the year with $64 million of cash as ending cash. That's a 50 million increase, but I want to add just to that explanation some of the uses of cash that we had in the year. We reduced our debt significantly. We used to have a debt of $53 million at the start of the year. I reduced it to $30 million. And in 2021, we started a return of capital program to shareholders, and we spent $8.8 million in the year in share repurchases that were there afterwards canceled. So cancellation of shares, and $2.8 million in dividends. Yeah, ending cash, I'll give you the number at December 31st, $64 million. We are increasing that cash position on a monthly basis in 2022, but I will report on our ending Q1 cash when we disclose financial results for the quarter.
And just to clarify, your dividend, is it fixed on a quarterly basis?
Yeah, we have a quarterly dividend in place. We put it in place at the end of 2021. So Q4 2021 was the first quarterly dividend that we paid out. We're currently paying a dividend of 2 cents Canadian per share. And the objective of the dividend is to have a sustainable dividend that can grow over time. It's not pegged to copper price. It doesn't have any other driver. It's essentially a fixed dividend that currently represents a not bad yield of 5.5%. If you consider the year-end share price of Amerigo. But now that we're touching on the subject of dividends and yields, I think it's important to explain that the dividend yield of 5.5% that we have is only one of the components of what you could call our view of returning capital to shareholders. I mentioned buybacks. Our share buyback yield in 2021 was 4.4%. So if you put the dividend and the share buyback together, you have a net payout yield of 9.9%. And the reduction of the debt can also be seen as a yield. And we had a debt paydown yield of 11.6% in 2021. So all of those items put together represent a very attractive shareholder return yield of 21.5% in 2021.
Aurora, I want to ask one more question before we wrap it up. What really stands out to me about this Amerigo Resources story is that it's the ultimate ESG play. You take an environmental liability, you convert it into an economic asset. In this case, it's copper, and you sell it and you make money doing it, and you do it very well. And in addition to that, you and your team have been doing it for many years. So I can only think there's huge upside with this business model, either within Codelco or within other mining companies in Chile. Can you just speak to that, and what are your plans going forward?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you're putting it forward to us. Amerigo essentially can be seen as an ESG visionary. You know, in 2003, the concept of producing copper out of tailings was almost anomalous, right? Especially considering the copper prices back in the day were essentially 80 cents per pound. So we came into the market at a great time. We have garnered a significant amount of successful operational experience at MVC, and we feel that this model of MVC can essentially be cloned in other locations, in other mines. Chile is an ESG-minded country. President Boric, who's taking over in March of this year, has an aggressive, positively aggressive ESG mindset and ambitions. So we really feel that time has come to replicate this or similar models in terms of recovering copper from sources that were originally not considered attractive enough. So it is without question an idea which time has come.
Aurora, that was a great overview of the Amerigo story, and I want to thank you for sharing it with us today. And to all of our viewers, if you have any further questions for the Amerigo management team, by all means, send us an email to info@bloorstreetcapital.com. Once again, Aurora, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for having us over, Jimmy. Much appreciated.